Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have a set of terrifying encounters ranging from Dogman, Bigfoot, Reptilian, what have you. Before we get into these, let's get a couple links going. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch store to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Those links are in the description below. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook version, is available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. They were written by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. The links to those are in the description as well. Now, I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Today's first encounter comes to us from Blair County, Pennsylvania. I was walking on a trail in the state game lands adjacent to a swamp area just near a creek. I had my shotgun with me on this walk in order to get a few shots off at some crows. The sun had just started to set, but there was still plenty of daylight out. When I just got past the swamp, there was this large patch of mountain laurel. It was pretty high, maybe 5 to 6 foot in places. It was at the patch of mountain laurel that I felt really uneasy, like I was being watched. I turned and looked at the patch of laurel over my shoulder. I could see something standing in the growth. As I turned to get a better look, I saw 2 muscular legs under the laurel, but could only see from the shoulders up, as it was behind the large patch of growth. This thing was easily 8 feet tall and had locked eyes on mine. They were a dull amber color, from what I could see. It had a wolf-like head with dark gray or black, short, fluffy hair. It never took its eyes off of me, even as I backed away. As I made my way out of there, I had a really bad feeling about what had just taken place. You see, I've hunted that area all my life, and I've never had anything out of the ordinary on game land happen during hunting season or otherwise. Today's second encounter. So to preface this encounter, I was driving on State Road 54, a road in Florida that goes all the way through the state, and for the most part, used to be all woods. It was about 3:45 in the morning, and I was driving to a friend's house who lives 45 minutes away from me to carpool to our job to a city about 90 minutes away from where he lived. I was leaving the city I lived in and was driving through a more heavily wooded area. I had just stopped at a red light. As I was waiting for the light to turn green, I saw a glow of 2 bright orange eyes. The woods were approximately 25 feet from the main road. The eyes got closer like it hadn't seen me, and looked to be 6 to 7.5 feet tall. It was too dark to see any features, but when our eyes connected, the thing bolted into the woods. It just didn't look human. At this point, I thought it might be a bear or something, as it was standing on its back 2 legs. And I mean, that son of a bitch was quick for its size. I have no idea what I saw, but the profile seems to look like some sort of shapeshifter or dogman. I have no idea. Today's third part of the upload. Upon reading online about reptilian creatures visiting people, I summoned up my courage to speak about my experience several years ago. In 2005, I lived in Colchester, England with my long-term partner, and I was working at a local cafe where I met and worked with people who first introduced me to the beliefs surrounding the Illuminati. When I fell pregnant, we decided to move to Australia, where weird things started to happen during my sleep. The first one I remember is waking up, not being able to move or talk. It was extremely frightening, and although it happened on several occasions, I was hesitant to tell my partner in case he thought I was crazy. On the contrary, I felt I was mentally and spiritually strong, which helped me fight to overcome the forces that were controlling me every time. I also used to see tiny green lights in the corners of my room during the night. One night I was awoken to find what I can only describe as a reptile-like creature standing over me on two legs. It had a frill around its neck that was in a threatening-like extension, very muscular, and it had a tail. It was making this hissing noise. I felt certainly not friendly, looking almost through me when our eyes met, and, as previous experiences, I was not able to move or speak. I felt paralyzed yet wide awake. I was in absolute terror. I shut my eyes and opened them, and it was gone. I was beside myself, and I was in fear of its return. It wasn't the last time I awoke to it. It also came to me in a dream, and in my dream I was sitting at a friend's square table talking with her, and I knew it was there. In my dream, I remember as my friend was talking, I was being coaxed away and taken by it. It felt like an out-of-body experience, as I could see myself in my dream at the table with her. I knew I was being taken. I managed with all of my spirit to fight the strength he had on me, and I remember feeling like I wasn't ready to go, and he'd be back when I was. But after that, it didn't return and has not. After I had my baby, I remember seeing lights, the same green ones I saw in my room in her cot at night when she woke to feed. I don't know why this is happening to me. I just know I'm not crazy. Today's fourth encounter comes to us from British Columbia. I was camping. There was nobody else in the park. It was cold, so I went to the washroom for a hot shower. When I returned to my tent, I jumped in my sleeping bag, and immediately something big walked into my campsite. I had left the leftovers from dinner on the picnic table. It started to pick at the tinfoil on the table. It was crumbling the tinfoil about 5 to 6 feet above me. It was about 4 feet from me, and I was terrified. Its breathing was so deep and loud, it dicked around with the stuff on the picnic table for a few minutes while I lay there not making a noise. Just then the park warden was doing his drive-thrus. When he drove by my campsite, this thing stopped what it was doing. When the headlights shone on my tent, I could see a figure of what looked like this huge man in a furry coat. I could see its shoulders, its head. I was praying that the warden would stop, but he couldn't see anything from his position, so he just disappeared down the road. But this thing started with the tinfoil and fish again. It seemed like my lifetime, but it finally dropped the tinfoil and turned and walked right beside my tent. And from about 8 feet above me, it let out this most horrific scream I'd ever heard. It sounded like a lion roar, with a high-pitched gurgling scream, all at the same time. That seems impossible, but it happened. It echoed through the valley so loud it was unreal. After it stopped roaring, everything went dead quiet. Then I heard the same roar come from the valley below. I would never make this stuff up, and I know what I saw and I smelled and heard that night. I'm a true believer. After the other one roared back at this one, this thing just turned in the direction of the other one and just crashed right through the woods, breaking off branches on its way. As soon as it was gone, I jumped into my car and drove out of the park to sleep in town in my car. I went back to my campsite the next day and packed everything up. I was going to spend the whole summer there, but that next morning I drove all the way back to Nova Scotia. That was enough British Columbia mountain camping for me. Today's fifth encounter. Several years ago, an old friend and I were walking on this bike trail in northwest Arkansas. It wasn't long after we heard what sounded like a baby crying or like a cat wailing in pain in the tree line next to the bike trail. Our first thought was that there was either an injured animal or possibly a mama cat in labor. We skimmed through the trees but found nothing. We took a few steps forward when a humanoid creature stepped out from the trees and began to cross the bike trail in front of us. It was probably close to 7 feet tall, extremely slender, with knobby knees and elbows. It was all black with long arms that hung past its knees and slightly hunched. We only got the side view, but from what we could tell, it had no facial features. All it did have was an odd-shaped head, but I would say more of a diamond than your rectangle. I remember its head coming to a point. It was so long-legged that it walked out of the tree line and took one step in the middle of the bike trail, and then it was on the other foot. It had reached the opposite side and disappeared into the fence line. The girl I was with looked at me, panicked, and said, "What do we do?" Because at this point, it was continued past the creature or turn around and run back past whatever was wailing in the trees. Needless to say, I ended up saying, "Run." We turned around and didn't stop running until we ended up back at our apartment, slamming the door and locking it behind us. I actually went back the next morning, because the way it vanished into the fence almost seemed as though there had to have been a hole for that creature to walk through. But when I went back, it was nothing but a solid fence the whole way down. No sign of anything from that night before. Today's sixth encounter comes to us from British Columbia. My cousin and I were hunting up on a hill behind a place redacted. We stopped at a cut block and got out of the vehicle and walked on the skid trail. Before long, the trail split into two different paths. One went up the mountain, the other went down. My cousin and I decided to split up. He was going to go down the skid trail, I was going up. It wasn't too windy, but there was a slight breeze that day. As I was walking up the trail, there was this huge rock in the middle of the skid trail, so I stood on it and listened for sounds. It was eerily quiet. Not a bird was chirping. So, after deciding that I was keep going, I caught a whiff of something raunchy. I had thought my cousin might be close and farted, but he wasn't even close to me. As I moved slowly off the rock again, I caught this horrible, foul, sulfur-rotten flesh smell. Nothing I have ever smelled before. It stopped me dead in my tracks. I did a 360 turn. Then there was this low-pitched whine noise coming from the dense brush in front of me. Again, nothing I have ever encountered, or nothing I've ever heard sounded like this. I could see the tops of the sapling trees bending over as some sort of creature was crashing through the dense brush. I'm not sure, but I believe that I came in contact with something. I got really scared at this thing and took off. I screamed for my cousin to get up here. He came running up and said, "What the hell are you doing?" I said, "I'm thanking my lucky stars I'm still alive." I told him what I smelled and what I saw and heard. We instantly headed back for the truck. As we were walking down the skid trail back to the truck, there was a hill that bordered the cut block. We could smell the beast moving with us as we walked to the truck. It followed us from the other side of the hill. We finally reached the truck and got into it. We waited there to see if this thing was going to show itself, but no luck. I said to my cousin, "Let's go have a look up the trail." We looked on the ground and we saw a huge track that kind of looked like toes and a heel, like a human barefoot in the mud. But there was large claws attached. Whatever made this print would have had to have weighed a lot. And there was marks like it was dragging something. I to this day still believe there's some sort of monster out in those woods. Today's seventh encounter. One night I awoke in a state that I can only describe as a spasm. My whole body was in a rigid state. I couldn't move a muscle, and I felt like something was on top of me. I fought to get movement back into my body. I couldn't turn my head or move at all. It was like I was having a fight to get control of my own body. After a few panic-stricken moments, I could just barely move my fingers, only a little bit. I then felt that there was more than just a spasm. I felt dirty and touched. It was a horrible feeling from deep inside of me. I could barely move my toes, again very slightly. My throat felt like it was being held. I could feel something was on top of me. My hands were at my side, but it felt like they were wrapped around my own throat, holding tightly. I was using all my might to break free from this spasmodic state. Then I could feel something breathing into my left ear, a sound of a growl-like noise right next to my right ear. I struggled to move my head to the left, like breaking free from a stranglehold. I could barely see the outline of a head, a big long head next to my own, as the spasm-like feeling started to wear off. A tiny bit at the time, I could work out that this thing was on top of me and looked like a lizard or a newt thing. It was like a blending together of all the things around, or maybe it was invisible. I'm not sure which, but I could see it clearly as the few seconds passed. It was reptilian. It growled at me again. My mind and my body gave all I could do so. I bared my teeth at it, and I could feel it reading my mind. I was swearing at it and shouting in all sorts of obscenities. I felt violated and used. The next thing was quickly off of me and standing on one side of the room at the bottom of the bunk bed. A light came on through the gap of the curtains. There were different shades of golden light, which also had very small particles inside it, like dust or small stars, which moved around like little bright lights. This reptilian creature was about 6 feet tall. I could sense it was either proud or happy of itself, maybe both. I tried to sit up as best as I could, and through my mind I swore at it again. The creature walked forward and stepped into the light beam. As it did, the feet and legs vanished into the light. The more the creature moved forward towards the window, the more it vanished. After it was gone, I felt relaxed, but I could still feel where I was held around my throat. I felt like I was violated by this horrendous monster. I awoke at a bright sunny day. I could hear my mom downstairs washing up and doing housework. I laid in my bed and didn't move a muscle. I ran the incident through my head again, and yes, I could still feel where I was held around my throat. I know this happened. My mind and heart and soul knows this happened. And for the life of me, I could not run downstairs to explain to my mother about this. Who would have believed it? How would my parents have handled such a thing? I didn't know what to do. Since that night my stepfather passed away, I asked my mother if she believed in aliens or UFOs. She replied that my stepfather once said he saw a UFO near Brighton, East Sussex, while at the sea in the 60s, and he swore that it was a UFO, but only told my mother this. I never told my mom about my experience, as I thought it would be too harrowing for her to hear. What do I do about this experience? I would love to do something about it. Today's final encounter comes to us from Fort Simpson, Canada. We were hunting and we saw some tracks from moose, so we went to the bank of the creek and started to follow the tracks. We followed it for about an hour when we decided to call for the moose. We called a couple of times, then we heard this large grunt followed by a deep, deep growl. Thinking it was a bear, we kept trying to call the moose. We called for about a half an hour before we gave up and ended up walking back to our boat. We got back but realized that we were off our trail and far away from our boat. We started walking along the bank of the creek. When we saw the moose on the other side of the creek, we stopped and shot the moose. We went to skin it, and my cousin said if the moose was on this side, then what made all those noises? I said it must have been a bear. It started getting dark, but we started to skin the moose. Later that night, we were still skinning the moose and loading our jet boat when we started hearing the noises again, this time followed by breaking bushes and snorts in the air, like something was smelling something they liked. We were a little scared, so we got the rifles ready. We made our fire bigger and started making a lot of noise. Then the noises stopped. We finished skinning the moose and then finished loading the moose. By this time, we were about to leave when I had realized, as we forgot to cut off the rack. The sun was coming up and we heard the noises from where the moose was. We thought it was a bear, so we grabbed our guns and ran towards it. When we had got there, there was some sort of dog-like monster. It was squatting while picking pieces of meat off the remainder of the carcass. Right then, swear I almost shit my pants. It stood up. It must have been 8 feet tall. It picked up the head and most of the other remains and walked away. Quickly, we ran back to our boat and got out of there. Alright guys, there's tonight's upload. I want to apologize for how I sounded tonight and how I read tonight, because this was not one of my better ones, and I honestly I feel like trash right now. It's tired, no fever, but this whatever is really kicking it to me, and I really appreciate everybody always listening and sticking around, and I can't even get my ending right. That's how out of it I am today. Anyway, guys, I hope you guys have a great night, and I'm going to try to feel better so I can put a banging upload out tomorrow for you guys, because that's what you guys deserve every night, is an amazing upload, and this is a shit show. Alright, have a great night, guys. Thanks.